Hi there. Welcome to another edition of TokStocks. I'm your host, Keir Reynolds, and today we're lucky enough to have Tony Moreau, CEO of American Eagle Gold, trades on the TSX Venture Exchange with the symbol AE. How you doing, Tony?
I'm good, Keir. It's Moreau, like Island of Dr. Moreau.
Okay, shall we do it again?
No, it's fine.
Awesome. Well, thanks for spending a bit of time with us here today. Why don't we sort of just get into it a little bit? So for some of my viewers, and maybe including myself who don't know you, maybe you could discuss a little bit about your background, who you are, how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, look, been in the industry for 13 years now. So yeah, the year I met my wife, the year I got in the business. Queen's Commerce, grad. Loved university so much, I decided to work at the Toucan. Shout out to the Toucan on Princess Street for a year. One of the most fun times of my life. And, after a year, I decided it wasn't enough. I traveled to Australia for another year. But got to meet my best friend there too. So, things happen for a reason. And then after that, I was 2 years out of school and no job. And it was hard to market myself. Getting out of commerce, you're pretty much 99% you get a job. But if you're 2 years out of commerce, it's pretty tough. So I thought in order to kind of market myself and show that, I wasn't as stupid as I looked by not going to work for 2 years, I did my CFA, and I did it in 18 months. So back in the day, you could do it, I did December, June. And then from that point, when I was almost done my CFA, I thought I was, start to look for a job. I was a little doing odds, ins, and outs. I was working at a trading firm for a bit. And the trading firm was making some money, trading stocks. At the time, Gold was doing well. The Roosevelt mine had just gone into production. And, my uncle, who I can talk about later, he pretty much said, don't go into banking, which is what I wanted to do. He said, get into mining. He said, mining's super interesting in this world, where you have to work. He says, you want to work with interesting people. You want to travel the world so you can meet more interesting people, see different cultures. And he said, this business, it gets stressful. There's always problems, but it keeps you light on your feet. It keeps you young. And you're always putting out fires, whether you're in the exploration business or mining business. And I found it a little bit tough to try and, get into the mining business, and because I was trading a lot of junior stocks and I'm gold, and I couldn't get into these junior plays. So what happened was I met a headhunter, and he said, take your 10 favorite companies down and call the CEO from each of them. He said the CEO is a person that will probably be, even though they're busy, they're probably not expecting to get random emails because everyone just answers emails for them. So the first company I contacted was I Am Gold, and I randomly got a coffee with a guy named Steve Letwin, and we hit it off right off the bat. He hired me on the spot, and I started off doing IR work, helped manage the golf tournament. I went to site for a year, got my chops, kind of learning operations in Suriname. That was probably the most beneficial year to my whole career. I still tell students, I was talking to a guy the other day, if you want to be in mining, you can always come back to banking. You got to get a job in ops. Then I came back. I did stuff. I did innovation. I did corp dev. Did a lot of things. I volunteered in this group, which kind of also helped me transition my career. It's called Young Mining Professionals. Met a guy named Steve Stewart. And then from there, we started this scholarship called the Young Mining Professional Scholarship. We grew it from $4,000. It's giving away $230,000 this year. And then one day, this guy, Steve Stewart, he said, I want you to work for my company. I said, you like to public speak. That's really the big differentiator, especially in the junior mining business where you got to explain, articulate your story. And I said no, and then something at I'm Gold happened. It was just glass ceilings. COVID happened, and I just wanted to make a change. So he told me, he said, work for a year, learn everything, you do everything, and then we can maybe put you in a leadership role. And day 2 on the job here, he said, we're going to get rid of the CEO that we're going to go public with, and you got to talk to Bill Powers tomorrow. Bill Powers is online guy. It's like Crux. He said, you're interviewing with him tomorrow on American Eagle Gold. And at the time, we had an asset in Nevada. And it's kind of baptism by fire, but, learned along the way, and it's been really fun. And my uncle helped me a lot, and we ended up finding this project in BC, and it's kind of been a rocket ship ever since. And we work with really great people. We focus on Canadian assets. We focus on elements that we think will be, stand the test of time: copper, gold, uranium. And, if you have good people, you're in a good location, you're going to find some good projects along the way. We found one with NAC. I think it's a real differentiator. I'm not going to say world class, but I want to.
Well, excellent. Thanks for a really detailed, nice overview on that. Some great experience there, and obviously you got a bit of a knack for the role. So maybe you could just go into a little bit more about like the OR group. I guess that's sort of Stephen's sort of group of mining companies and exploration companies. Could you just touch on a little bit about what the OR group's all about?
Yeah, OR group's a group of like-minded entrepreneurs. They all have leaders like myself, based in Canada, focuses on good elements, uranium, copper, gold, mostly in Canada. If you're going to spend this much time and effort and money to bring a project, which is 1,000 that's going to work out, you don't want to start risking that the government's going to take it away. This whole stuff in Panama here has completely changed my whole outlook on exploration companies. If I was an investor, I probably wouldn't invest in any company that's outside of Australia, US, and Canada. Because once Panama takes away mine, everything's on the table. Congo, Chile, Argentina, everywhere. So Canada's a great place to be. So that's kind of the aura about us. Or groups is kind of the way that we share the costs across. So the way you kind of get long-term sustainability in your price of your stock is really by making a discovery. And the best factor to make a discovery is by putting as many meters into the ground as possible and having smart people help you direct where those meters are. So you really want to reduce the amount of G&A you have. And the hidden secret on the street is you ever see a company with, one CFO, one accounts payable, a legal person they're paying a full-time salary. That's money they're taking away from the ground and they're putting it into people. So what we do is we cost share between 6 or 7 companies. So we really have good people like a CFO. We'll probably pay him $250,000, but instead of me paying him $250,000, I pay him about 40 out of my company. So it saves our company an extra $200,000 to put in the ground. And as my grandfather always said, you look after your pennies, the nickels look after themselves. So that's what the OR group's all about. We're based in Toronto, but we got assets in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, BC, Quebec, Ontario, and one in West Africa.
Can you give us a little overview on American Eagle Gold, what the mission and vision is for the company, and like what sort of active projects you have?
We have one project because that project's good enough to stand on its own. We don't need to diversify, not putting any other dollars anywhere else. And we're a good story, so we want to start confusing investors. But what I always tell people, and it's true, is Canada's most excited porphyry discovery. We made a big discovery in 2022. We made an even better hole discovery at the end of last year when the assays came out in January. But anyone can say words like that. I let the results speak for themselves. So right underneath that, on my headline of my presentation, I got 302 meters, 1.09% copper equivalent near surface. That's a Chilean hole in BC that we have in Canada, and not in the Arctic, not in the Golden Triangle, somewhere that you can access, you can drive to. It's an hour and 15 minutes from Smithers. And Kier, I don't know if you've been to Smithers, but I would say it's like Collingwood, Ontario. It's a place that I would want to be, and that is so key. I just talked about the whole Panama stuff. You want to be in Canada, but you want a place where you can raise a family, and we're going to have a huge bottleneck with skilled labor and people that are running these companies. So having a potential property that can be a mine so close to a nice town that a lot of people want to live at is a big difference maker. And my uncle helped found this project for us. He was an exploration geologist. Chief geologist, exploration for Freeport in the 80s. He did the original mapping at Grasberg. For those who don't know Grasberg, just know this. It produces more gold than any other mine in the world, but it's called a copper mine. That's how friggin' big it is. So he did the original mapping there, and he came to me with this project, NAC. And he said, Tony, you got to buy this project. And he's got to buy it now. And he goes, the second best target I've ever seen. And he goes, take my word for a grain of salt, but targets are what you're looking for. And he picked out our first, exploration plan, 7 drill holes. And our first drill hole, we took it out of the ground. And like I said, he calls me a bean counter. I'm a bean counter. And my uncle said, don't even have to see the assays. I'll know if this is going to be good. And he was living in Ecuador. He lived in Ecuador during the winter. And he switched Ecuador and Cambodia. I forget. It's hard to explain. But he lived 6 months. He was in Ecuador at the time. And I remember he didn't talk on WhatsApp or Zoom, you millennials. He talked on Skype. I don't know if anyone uses Skype anymore, but I talked to him on Skype. And he was looking at the core. I was on the phone with him, and he's like, you got it. I was right. And these geos, I got to tell you, there's a reason why they go through 3 wives like my uncle, and they travel all the world. They can't hold down a family. And my uncle had a lot of money, but he's extremely cheap. And he lived in this little mini hotel room in Ecuador, not even a great view. And all he cared about was geology. He worked 20 hours a day and ended up killing him. And all he wanted was to be right. He just worked all the time on this stuff. And when he saw it, he goes, I'm right. And he was so proud of himself. And I was proud of him too. And he was proud that I was involved in the project. And the sad story is he ended up dying 2 weeks later of a heart attack, probably because he overworked himself. He lived so high up in the Andes. I think that's the mountain range anyway. But everything's kind of worked out since then. We hired a guy named Charlie Gregg and his team. And Charlie was the chief geologist and the guy that put together GT Gold. They sold to Newmont. So not only do you want good location, but you want the geologist that made the discovery and sold the company closest to yours. And there's no recent discovery and sale closer to us than the GT Gold property. So we have him. We have a great team. We've been hitting good holes. There's a lot of non-GT Gold companies, but most of the time what happens, they do a great hit here and they do a big raise. They go up to $100, $200 million and then they come down because they can never replicate the raise or replicate that hit. You see it over and over and over again. But what we did is we hit that great hit in 2022, 2201. And we've been hitting better and better holes ever since. But it's a really bad market right now, and people don't really care, even about great holes. What you need is a spectacular hole. And that most recent hole that we had, I call that Chilean hole in BC, and it's exceptional. And what it does, though, it allows investors to really crank their necks. And instead of looking at your company for maybe 10 minutes, they look at it for 10 hours. And they start peeling the onion. And that's why you're starting to see the price discovery that we're having, because people are getting into the stock. They're realizing we have more than they really realize because they're starting to understand the story. So that's kind of what American Eagle is. We're fully financed. We have a great partner in Teck. So I told myself, if we're going to do another raise, I said last year, I want to make sure it comes with an uplift. I want an investor that I know 100% is going to hold on to you. And Teck buys, they're not speculators. They're not trading stocks. They're buying you so they could have a mine someday. And they really believe that we could have a mine. And they did not one, not two, but three private placements with us last year. They funded us for 2023, but I wanted to make sure if we came out with great holes at the end of 2023, we wouldn't sell off in 2024. And we're funded for this year's program, which we are now. So again, like any raise that we do, we want to make sure it comes with an uplift, but we're fully funded for this year. We're really starting to understand the geology. I talk to Charlie and Neil almost every day to their chagrin, and they're going to piece this thing together. And I think the proof's in the pudding. Just look at the price discovery recently. You don't see that very often. Usually what happens is a release comes out at the end of your drill hole. There's a spike. Smart money gets out. People come in. It tails off. But it's continuing to go up because anyone that's selling, there's strong hands coming in. And right now there's nothing on the sell side. So it's just coiling itself. And we're really ready for an exciting 2024 drill program. And the best pathfinder for copper and gold, I always say this, is copper and gold. It's the geology. It's the previous drill holes. And until this year, 2024, we had really no geology to base on. It's geophysics and a lot of vertical holes. And mostly historically, before we got there, they're mostly shallow. So if you're really able to hit what we've hit, 2024 should be even better. And I come back to progression. Everything has progressed for us. We've looked after our balance sheet better. We've had better investors, and our drill holes have gotten better. So, what better investment to get into if you like junior mining stocks than American Eagle? The only problem we're having right now, people don't know about us. Contacted Pierre Lassonde. You think he'd know about us, never heard about us. And the other things, investors, retail investors that want to invest the $5-10 grand, again, talk to your investment advisor. They look at where your stock has been. They're like, well, you guys were at 10 cents last March. You're up 700%. I've missed the boat. I said, just wait a second. Don't look at our stock price. Look at our market cap. And look at market caps that are bigger than ours. Are our results better? Mostly they are. So there's a lot of room right there to grow. So where do you think that we can go in terms of size of market cap? Is it 250 million? Is it 500 million? Because there's 500 million, that's almost a 10x. So I think investors have to look more at comparables as opposed to where you came from. Because guess what? I sold Amazon at $350, ended up going to 5,000.
Hey, there you go. Well, Tony, you're very passionate. That's for sure. I do a lot of these interviews, and you're definitely as passionate as they come. I would imagine it's got something to do with having your family so sort of intertwined in this project. And congrats on making your grandfather proud there. So in terms of like what you have going on for 2024, you talked about how before you were kind of just going off of geophysics, some vertical holes. What sort of like 2024 program sort of like look like? How many meters, how many sort of holes? Do you have any of that stuff sort of outlined? Anything that you could talk about here with us?
Yeah, we're working on it right now. So we're fully funded for the last 2 seasons. We've done 14,000 meters of drilling combined. Almost 8,000 meters in 2023, 6,000 in 2022. This year we're fully funded for 10,000 meters. Let's call it. It's about $400 a meter. So it's a $4 billion program. Right now we have $5.5 million in the bank. But we still have some warrants that are coming in. And then, if Teck ends up matching their 19.9, my expectation is we'll have around $10 million in the bank plus in June. So fully funded potentially for a 20,000 meter program. But all we have to do right now is 10,000 meters. The main focus that we're going to have, if you've seen the map of where we've done drilling, where we drilled last year, 2201 was a really high grade zone. So our plan for 2023 was, let's cherry pick some of that grade and let's drill an incline, east to west. And no one had ever drilled a long east to west incline before on the whole property, let alone the south zone. So we only plan to drill at 200-300 meters, hit some of that chalcopyrite and leave, and we just never stopped. And we saw our stock price jump in June of last year. It's because we're telling the market we're still drilling, and we ended up drilling 800 meters of 0.5% copper equivalent from surface. And that was a moment for me, Kira. I was like, this is going to be a mine someday. And the investors are just kind of behind that, which makes sense. You got 1,000 other CEOs saying that they have the best property like me, and, you feel like someone's stuck in an avalanche. You don't know what's up or down and what company's good or bad. So I don't blame investors. But anyway, so, starting there, we drilled all these incline holes. We started hitting really great stuff. And we weren't able to focus on the north as much. But we did a west-east hole 2312 last year. Came up gangbusters, and then we ended up our season on hole 2317. So the only 2 holes we drilled west to east long were our best holes ever. And in between those collars, it's about 300-400 meters. Nobody historically ever has drilled there. So our plan, we're piecing together the geology. 2312 looks pretty much the same as 2317. We're very confident that we can connect the north and the south zones. What's really interesting, what changed the whole game as 2201, that changed it for us. We hit that high grade surface. 2308, again, we didn't believe we had that big of an open pit in the south, which we did. So that changed things for us. But at the very end of the season here, I believe we were on the 15th hole. We sent an IP team up there. They're actually already in the Babbitt region. We didn't have to pay mob for them. So they finished their IP program. And I remember we got the results. We were on hole 16. And we took the IP. And what we did is we put holes 2308 and 2311. So again, 2308 was 800 meters of 0.5% copper equivalent. 2311 was about 600 meters of 0.62. And we put those against the IP like this. And what we noticed is that the highest grade of those holes intercepted something called an IP shoulder. So an IP shoulder is where your chargeability transitions from high to low. And we're like, IP geophysics, it mostly doesn't work. Sometimes it does. It works as a great target, but sometimes it doesn't. This time it seemed like it did. So we thought, we have one more last hole to do. Let's see if we can maybe drill down the shoulder and hit really great grade. Because A, we're going to have a great result to end the season. B, it will show that this shoulder actually is a good targeting tool. And guess what, here? This shoulder not only goes north, it goes all the way around this whole Babbitt Porphyry stock. So we hit that shoulder, and that's where that 302 meters of 1.09% came from. And if you look at that IP shoulder, it's on the main page of our website. That shoulder is massive. It comes all the way up, forms a bench, and it comes to surface, and it wraps all the way around. And we hit a hole called 2309. Teck came in, and they're like, we want you to do one thing. We want you to drill a hole 750 meters away from any drilling that's ever been drilled in this property. And all you have to go on is 30-year geophysics. And I was like, okay, because each of these holes, I love cars here. Each of these holes costs as much as a Lamborghini. So I'm like, well, I might as well just drive drunk on the Lamborghini over the cliff because it's not going to yield any results. But what ended up happening was we ended up hitting on there. And we hit 0.4% of 120 meters. And that was a great hole for us. And I think a lot of people overlooked it. But that got Teck really excited. And that got the real investors, the geos, the mine engineers excited because if there's smoke there, there's likely fire, and this thing wraps all the way around. And fast forward to that IP, all of a sudden after the season, the beginning of January, we started doing some slices of the IP, And we noticed, well, 2309 was just collared a little bit too far north. What if it collared south and we hit that shoulder? Like, that's called a $100 million drill hole. It almost doubles your market cap overnight. So if we can prove that continuity, 750 meters to the east, wow. And then if it goes east, why doesn't it go north and back around? So there's so much for us to drill. We have so many targets, but these are high probability targets because what we noticed are a lot of the historical holes that we had, we retroactively already proved the thesis that we have, which is the shoulder and bench thesis, because a lot of the holes that investors look at, they look up your whole interval. So when you're seeing price discovery right now, that's a smart geologist coming into a stock. And when you look at our holes, a lot of times there's high grade at surface, there's 800 meters with nothing, and then high grade. And people overlook that bottom high grade because they're like, well, that high grade you can't mine, it's not connected to the top. But when you overlay with the geophysics, you realize that's actually part of the shoulder and bench system I was just talking about. And nearly every single hole that went near it came up with its highest grade right there. And for me, that was kind of like the third big aha moment. So when I kind of sound like a lunatic a bit on these interviews, and I sound really excited, it's because I am, because I got the data behind me. And it was a family day long weekend this weekend. And I get up in the middle of the night and just go analyze historical database. I was looking through 20,000 meters of drilling. And a lot of the old drilling that the guys did in 95 and 96, they overlooked it. There's one hole way out over to the east. I think it was 95-35. And it was about 250 meters. And when you look at the assessment reports, all assessment reports are available online. You can see historical work after 2 years. And they didn't even mention this hole in any highlights. But at the very bottom of it, they had about 10 meters of 1%. And that bottom of it is where you start to hit the bench. So even holes that were drilled 30 years ago kind of retroactively proved our whole shoulder and bench thesis. So it's all about targets. It's all about having the best probability. And I can't wait for it to be made when we start drilling.
Sure. Well, that's great. I think it's palpable. We can feel it through the camera here. It's nice when the data kind of supports what's actually happening with the drill stick. So in terms of the shoulder bench strategy or thesis that you've got, what's the sort of length, or what are the dimensions of that in terms of property?
Yeah, so I think what we'll be drilling is we'll be connecting zones about 600 meters from top and down if you're looking north-south, and probably 800 meters east to west. So if you look at 17 as a starting point, it's the most western colored hole we have. We'll probably build it north towards 2312. I'm thinking off the top of my head, it's between 460 and 600 meters. Then over towards 2309, it's about 800 meters. They're going to be they're all going to be incline holes mostly. And east-west, just going to do a grid. Just going to because we have the money and we have the patience, we're just going to do a grid. We're going to connect it, and we'll probably fall into some super high grade. But it's a lot better being in this place now that we're not kind of just going and searching for high grade. We know it's there, but just build out that min and show these big pockets of high grade that we have. So that's a plan. Holes will be anywhere from 300 meters to 850 meters. If you start seeing that we're drilling a 1,200 meter hole, watch out.
We'll be watching for that.
That's the little signal for you.
There you go, folks. If we hear that, that's the signal. So maybe to switch gears for a moment, you kind of touched on it a little earlier, liking Smithers and working in that sort of community. What's it like sort of working in BC as a whole? Do you have good community relations?
Really good relations. A lot of people ask that, and I always tell people, and it's no word of a lie, you treat that relationship the same way you treat your relationship with your family at home. Like, what's the foundation of a good, domestic relationship? It's really just honesty and communication. So that's kind of the foundation we start with. The first thing we did when we came, we had the property. We said, we got this property. We don't want to be there if you don't want us to be there. And we've had a really good relationship ever since. And, the Chief Murphy, Lake Babby Nation, just really great folk. They want there to be a mine. They just don't want to affect their salmon. And we're not close to anywhere the salmon spawn, so we're good there. Talk to them all the time. Got a text from the chief today. The community that a lot of them live at is called Burns Lake. There's a historical mine there, Bell and Grand Isle. People always talk about the Golden Triangle. What put Golden Triangle on the map? It was a Red Chris mine. Well, they're mining Bell and Grand Isle 25 years before they ever discovered Red Chris. So a lot longer history of mining. And man, Smithers, was kind of worried about going there. Like, I loved it. They have a ski in, ski out hill right in your house. Awesome breweries, awesome sushi, everything that you need in a town. Absolutely beautiful. I can't even imagine working anywhere but BC now. It's just, I had never really been there, never been to interior BC. It's one of the prettiest places I've ever been. It's absolutely amazing. It gets a little cold in the winter, but if it gets cold, that means you can ski.
Do you guys are you guys able to sort of work year round, or how does it sort of work in terms of your ideal sort of like setup?
Yeah, so there's year-round access. If you have a mine there, obviously you're working there year-round. They work in the Arctic. There's year-round access. You can drill there all year round, but it's all about your cost of capital. So in a perfect world, you want to kind of drill end of May, probably to end of October or early November. It's nice out, it's hot, it's easy, etc. Drilling in the winter is not tough at all. It just costs a little bit more because you got to keep the water tubes or whatever hoses warm. So you got these heat coils, so it costs a little bit more on the diesel. And usually you got to bring in some water trucks to keep the water flowing, just in case those hoses freeze over or you can't access some of the water sources. You do have to have water trucks. So that costs about $3,000 more a day. So that's really the only difference in terms of getting around the property and everything. It's fine. It doesn't snow too much there. It's cold, but people can deal with it. The time you really kind of want to avoid the work in there is the breakup. So end of March, beginning of May, those 2 months when that snow is melting, it's hard to drag a skid around. So an ideal world for me, you start drilling end of May, have a single skid, have a single drill rig, bring out a second drill rig sometime this season, run 2 drill rigs for a while, and then maybe transition back to one, let's say in October or November, and run that through all the way to March. That way you still do your, let's say, 20,000 meters of drilling, but you don't have that big gap that we have right now where you don't have catalysts in the near future. I think the big catalyst for us, luckily, is people are just finding out about our company. So we got a lot of buying. People have realized they kind of don't want to miss out on this opportunity. But in the likely world, I really want to just make sure we're almost drilling all the way throughout the season. So we always have news, always have something to talk about. As you can tell, every question you have takes about 5 minutes for me to answer. So I like to talk. So I like to talk to investors about new results we have. And the more drill holes we have, like I said, copper and gold proves more copper and gold. So things just can get better and better along the way.
Excellent. Well, we're going to switch gears here for a minute and talk sort of financial sort of cap structure. Maybe you can sort of walk us through your cap table. What does it look like? How many shares are out? You kind of touched on it a little bit in terms of some warrants and whatnot. And you've also got a couple of strategics. Maybe you could just sort of, again, you've already mentioned Teck. Maybe you could go a little further into the cap table on what you're able to disclose.
Yeah, I can disclose everything because it's all publicly available information, not necessarily mark to market because a lot of warrants have been exercised. But we have about $5.5 million Canadian in our bank account. Shares outstanding around 112 million shares. Options and warrants combined around 20 million. So that brings you about to 132. But remember, we have one rule at our group. Anyone that has options can't sell them. So really what you're talking about is your warrants. We have under 10 million warrants left over. I think it's around 8.5, 9, because a lot of those May ones have already been exercised, which is one of the reasons why we haven't accelerated our warrant exercise, because more than half of them have already been exercised. So not a lot of warrants outstanding left. Again, $5.5 million in the bank. Teck owns 20% of the company, equity-wise, 19.9. They don't have a right of first refusal, which is really kind of a big thing for us. Gives us options, so it creates a little bit more upside for the stock. Insiders, institutions, what I say that is 3 or 4 calls. How much of the stock can you get together? And that's about 46%. So with Teck and our insiders and institution, about 66% of the company.
You did a rather creative funding with Ore Finders. Can you sort of walk us through what you did there?
Yeah, really good question. So it showed the creativity that our group has. So our CFO, Joel Freeman, and Steve Stewart's our chairman, and myself, we're trying to figure out a way to get some more money to extend our drill program, our initial one, 2022. So our first drill program, we had about $1 million to drill, so it would only drill us about 3 holes. And we knew right off the bat we had something substantial on our hands. But it was about a 2 to 3 month delay when you come out with your assays. So how do you do a raise when you're at 3 cents? It would kill us here. So if we're at 3 cents, we want to raise $1.5 million or another $1 million. You'd have to probably raise it 2 cents, and it would just dilute. You pretty much kill the company. So how do we solve this problem? So what we did, which was interesting, so Orfiners, which is a sister company we actually spun out of originally early 2021, they had a liability on their hands. They had flow-through commitments that they had to put into the ground. They got that 3 years earlier, and because of COVID, they got extended a year, but then they did a deal with Agnico Eagle. So Agnico Eagle was spending all of their exploration dollars. So they didn't know where to put this money. We needed the money. So what they did is essentially they transferred their flow-through loan over to us, or flow-through cash. So we got $1 million more that we could spend, and it got rid of their liability. And what we did was we made a deal with them that we would have to pay back that $1 million within 18 months in either cash or equity at a 50% premium. So by April 2024, we'd either have to give them $1.5 million in equity or cash. And then the rest is history. So instead of doing the deal at 2 cents, we ended up raising our stock price to 30. Our value got a lot higher. People knew who we were, and we actually paid them back their shares when we were at 21 cents. So we reduced dilution by about 1,000%, which was extremely creative. It looked after our shareholders. And I think if you look after your pennies, your nickels look after themselves. I'm always about track record and progression, and not only just doing better on our drilling, but we've been able to do really smart, maneuvers that have looked after our capital structure, which I think is one of the most important things, if not the most important.
Thanks for getting into some detail there. While we're on the topic of capital, how much capital do you have now that you're able to talk about? What was sort of in your last sort of financials? Anything that you're comfortable in speaking about?
Yeah, mark to market, like as of yesterday, we have $5.5 million Canadian in the bank. So what I always want to do is I want to make sure we have enough money for our current drill program and looked after 2 years of G&A. So you're able to keep the business running, et cetera, and we have more than enough for that. So right now, our drill program is going to be approximately 10,000 meters. Year one is a little bit over 6,000. Last year is a little bit over 7,000, and this year we want it to be at least 10,000 meters. The thumb stocks, it costs about $400 per meter all in. So it's about a $4 million program, and it leaves us with $1.5 million, left over in the piggy bank for our G&A, et cetera. Also optionality to extend our drill program. Now, having said that, we have a lot of warrants. They're still in the money. So over half of them have been exercised, but I think there's a pretty good chance by June, without doing any financings, we'll have upwards of $10 million in the bank. So we're a very good position, luckily, unlike most people in the junior market, most companies. But that's not really to do with the credit of ourselves. That's the credit of the drilling. And the drilling brings the investors. It causes your share price to go up. And that's a real reason why Teck came in not once, not twice, but 3 times. So thanks to Teck and our drilling, we're fully financed and ready to go for 2024.
How much insider ownership is there currently with American Eagle?
So, insider ownership, we have about 46%. I like to say insider ownership is anyone that you can find the shareholders within 2 phone calls. So within 2 or 3 phone calls, we can track down about 46% of the ownership. Just under 10% is owned by Orfiners, about 10% is owned by our chairman. I own around 3%. Some other insiders, directors, et cetera, own about a combination of 10%. There's a few big institutions that are big shareholders in us, and then you got Teck in for another 20. So 66% of the shareholders, tight, sticky shareholders. But you also got to realize when you're seeing this buying recently since January, I think the average volume is around 700,000 shares. People are coming in at a lot higher valuation because they're not worried about the off season. They're worried about what we're going to drill this year. So we have a very small float. So it doesn't take a lot of great news to send the stock parabolic, and in my honest opinion. So a lot of the shares that are held right now are held there, at least for the drill program this year. I think people are really highly anticipating what we're going to do. It's all about your probability of hitting something. We discovered this IP signature, and where we drilled 2317 and went right down that shoulder. What's really interesting is that, when you look at our historical drilling, we're telling everyone, look, people are anticipating that we're going to prove this IP signature, but the really smart people out there realize we already retroactively proved it. So if you want to invest in a company, you want to invest in a company that has the most torque and the least downside. And in terms of probability and our chances, they're pretty darn good because we've already proved our thesis that we're going to go after this year, which is that kind of bench and shoulders strategy. So a lot of the people that are coming in right now that I spoke about earlier, they're technical guys. They really understand it. They like our team. They like our location. And I think we have a high probability of success.
In terms of like, what were the sort of last couple of financings? Do you have any sort of like overhang there? Anything you can comment about that?
Yeah, our last three financings. Well, first one was with Teck. The second one was with Teck, and the third one was with Teck and Charlie Gregg. So, talk about progression. So let's bring us back to May 2023. We did our stock was at 10.5 cents. People were still trying to make heads or tails of our results. And it took Teck in there to say, kind of push everyone over. So these guys have great results. Our stock was at 10.5 cents. They gave us around 30% premium. So they came at 13 cents, and there's a 60% premium on top of that on flow through. So that fundraising we did in May 2021 was at 20.5 cents. And I made sure it was at 20.5 cents because I wanted to make sure it was at least slightly higher than our previous kind of retail financing before that. Then fast forward to August 2023, our stock was at 24 cents. Teck gave us 28 cents. And after the 60% flow through premium, we got 54 cents. So shareholders were diluted at 54 cents. And then the next step that we did, and why we did that financing again, it was to make sure that we were protected for our 2024 program. The last thing we want to do is come out with great drill holes and people are waiting for a financing. And that last financing that we did was at 20.5 cents, just straight up. And it was with Charlie Gregg and Teck. And the real reason we did that is we wanted to pay back our that $1.5 million in equity that I spoke about earlier with ore finders. And because that, we diluted a bit and we allowed Teck to maintain their position in the company. And at that same time, we want to bring in Charlie Gregg. Because there's one thing having Teck come in and invest, but Charlie Gregg, that $250,000 of his net worth, a lot less than the $3-4 million of Teck's multi-billion war chest of cash. So it just gave it that second leg of probability. So those are the last three financings we did.
Great. And we'll sort of get into kind of wrapping up. Appreciate the time you spent with us. What's a typical day look like for you? And how are you enjoying your role as CEO?
I absolutely love it. It's almost like you're on a drug. It doesn't feel like work. It's exciting. Dealing with investors, public speaking. It's crazy. I was telling my father-in-law, I felt like I didn't work much, and my wife looked over. She goes, "You're always working. Kids go to bed. You're downstairs in the basement." I was reviewing, 20,000 meters of drill holes, meter by meter, last night, and going over the high grade ones, seeing what we could put on Twitter. But if you talk about waking up, I'm a father of 2 young kids, 1 and 4. Wake up around 6:30. Do an hour and a half hour of work if you're lucky, actually, before the kids get up, and usually do some calls with people in Europe, investors, etc. Get the kids ready. We always make a point bringing your kids together at school, and then we go downtown. I go downtown to the office, spend about 8 hours there, and try and pick up the kids from school as well. 3 hours, and then you start working again, probably done by 11 o'clock. So you're always kind of working. It's literally my job is talk to investors, whether you own $100 or $100,000, that's money you worked hard for. You believed in me, you believed in the project, and I'm happy to talk to you. And it's never a waste of time for me. I think 9% of the questions are good questions. If you have that question, there's probably everyone else has that same one. So it allows me to try and keep my finger in the pulse, think of what investors are actually thinking. But also, speaking to investors helps me kind of, refine my skills and speaking to investors, know what to say, what not to say. So I'm just telling people out there, you got any questions, find my cell phone, find my email, we can Zoom. This is a really interesting property, and, happy to sit on the top of the mountain and yell about it.
On that note, what sort of catalyst do you have over the next 6 months?
Near-term catalyst, and I told this to people in January when they were worried there'll be about 4.5 months of no drilling. Guys, it takes about 15 years from first drill hole to when you produce. Like 3 months of not drilling is not a bad thing. Got to rotate your crops, and you got to let the geos understand the geology, where they drill. And like I said, this is really expensive to drill. So when you put that drill in the ground, you better be sure it's going to hit. So this 4 months off is good. But, near-term catalyst, really, it's about people just knowing that they can invest in American Eagle. It's more demand than supply, and people are buying right now. So that's the big catalyst. It's just doing all this marketing right now. Obviously, you got Roundup, you got PDAC. Then after that, it's just making announcements about our 2024 drill program. Early May, mid-May, we'll be doing our IP. So we're going to do between 6 and 9 lines across the property to more properly allow us to target where to drill. This IP that we did towards the end of 2023 proved to be very handy. So it's definitely worth the investment to do it. And then depending how the weather is, May, June, we're going to start drilling. It's looking like a very mild winter. Obviously, I think it's 15 degrees out right now in Toronto. So, we could very easily be drilling somewhat mid-May, even early May. It just depends how the spring breakup is. So, and then you're going to be having assays all throughout the year. So assays will probably start coming out in June and July, and they're not going to stop. And based on how we hit, we're either going to do 1 rig or 2 rigs. And, we may just drill all the way throughout the winter. So there is no break of news. So those are the kind of catalysts coming out, and we're expecting really robust results. Again, these results that we hit, that Chilean hole in BC, that was based basically on geophysics. This is the first year we'll be drilling off copper and gold. And, when you do that, look out below.
Are you going to be, do you have a booth at PDAC?
Yeah, we have a booth at PDAC. Forget the number of the booth offhand, but we have a booth at PDAC. We're actually under the Ore Finders booth, but we actually have our own core shack too. So we're at our core shack on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we're at our booth the whole time. And Neil Prowse, Charlie Gregg, Dave Hoke, all geologists on our project will be there, and we're going to have core at both the booths. We'll be there for all 4 days. So come by, say hello, and check out some of that core. The Bornite's beautiful, man.
Yeah, I saw some at Roundup, and it was really interesting stuff. And it was neat talking to some of your geos to get a little bit more on the technical side of it, and seeing how excited they were about the project and whatnot. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to go down for that.
The best trade that I made. Sorry to cut you off there. I just thought of something. So the best trade I made in the market recently was just when that happened with NVIDIA the other day when they came out with their earnings. Obviously, it tailed down a bit because I think a lot of people were worried how can they keep it up so much. But I saw a picture of the CEO, and I was like, they have some good results coming out. There's no way he has that smile on his face without knowing something's going to go out. So I ended up buying some calls on NVIDIA right before the earnings, and it worked out. But anyways, you guys take these social cues when you look at people. So come by our booth, look at our core, but look at the look on Charlie Gregg and Neil Prowse's face. Look at that smirk. Look at that smile. And those guys believe in the same thing as a CEO of NVIDIA look like. I'm not saying we're going to be $1 trillion company, but those guys have a lot of confidence. They're very conservative people, geologists, but they're smiling about a mile long right now.
Well, my next question is going to be, why should investors consider investing in you right now? Any other comments to add to that?
Look, I always say talk to your geo friends, your technical friends, and your investment advisors. Look, if you're in this space, you want to invest. I think you got to invest in two metals as copper and gold. I think they're both like cigarettes and alcohol. They're inelastic. They're going to be going up long term. So you're safe that way, and you want to be in a safe jurisdiction. With the stuff going on with Panama, I think every third world country, pretty much any country outside of Australia, US, and Canada, is out the window. So, what projects in Canada do you think have the most torque, the most upside, have the best team part of it? And we're in BC. Tons of copper projects. That's one check. Charlie Gregg, what did he do? Well, he ran GT Gold. They ended up selling to Newmont. That's the most recent large copper project that was sold in BC. He's running a project. Another check. A lot of great historical results. We had a whole Chilean hole in BC. We're just off the races. And if you look at our relative valuation to other companies like Hercules Silver, et cetera, we're much smaller. So we got a lot of room to go. So there's a lot of torque. Our team knows what they're doing. And just put faith. But, in reality, you want to invest in these junior companies because you want to have a good chance at a 10X. So decide how much of your portfolio you want to put those risky assets in, split them up, and even 2 go to 0, 1 goes to 10x, you're laughing. So we want to be one of those 3 or 4 companies that you decide to invest in. But again, talk to your investment advisor. I have 3 stock tips. I always tell people, never take a stock tip is tip 1. Tip 2 is never take a mining stock tip, because most people are just trying to make themselves feel better about the mining stock tip that they made that may be wrong. The 3rd stock tip is buy American Eagle Gold.
Nice. Well, that's probably a pretty good note to wrap up on. Any final thoughts that we didn't cover?
That's about it. Like I always tell people, people always want to sell their winners and double down on their losers. What I say is look at American Eagle Gold. Don't try to catch a falling knife. Hitchhike to a shooting star. I believe American Eagle is that shooting star.
Great. Well, I really appreciate your time, Anthony. I know you must be busy with everything coming up, so I'll let you get on with the rest of your day. I appreciate you spending some time with us.
Thanks a lot, Kier.